So welcome to Spacebar, Mindful Pauses for Conscious Conversations. And my name is Yvette, and I am the daughter of this mother and daughter podcast. And
I am Linda, and I am the mother of this mother and daughter podcast.
well, let's welcome our listeners, and also let's kind of give them some insight as to why this podcast, why now, and then we'll get into what we hope to bring to the table with this podcast and our intention with it. Sound good?
That sounds good.
All right.
So you lead.
All right, I can do that. That's funny enough because you led me most of my life, and now I get to be the one who's in charge.
Yes. The techie.
The techie. So this actual podcast is something that we've been playing with for quite a while and have been encouraged by many people over the years to find a way of sharing the depth of our relationship and how we came to cultivating this kind of relationship as a mother-daughter relationship that is one of, yes, mother and daughter. We know what that hierarchy is all about, but also one that's has been developed through a lot of friendship and a lot of shared experiences over the years. And I'll go back to, I think the first time we really gleaned some insight into how different our relationship has been was we were doing that goddess trip in England. And we flew to London, spent the night there, and then met the rest of the group, which was, I don't know, 16 or 17 women. And then 17 women. And then from there, we had one man who was our driver and who lugged our bags all over the countryside.
Yes, he did. That was called Sacred Journeys for Women. That was the name of the tour.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that, because I couldn't remember the name of it, just more so the experience of it. And of course, in the 2 to 3 weeks that we were there in England, we were with a variety of women many who were my age and many who were your age, and all at different stages in their lives, such as we were exploring the goddess and the goddess I am of who we are as women, and coming to terms with that and what it meant to us at the time. And I remember that these women who may have been friends with each other, but we were the only mother-daughter duo on that trip. Everybody else were individuals coming for their own reasons, coming for their own intentions, their own healing. And I found sometimes that they had a tendency to watch us when we were together, and nobody commented on why, and they didn't share why, but it was I thought it was a little bit uncomfortable at times. Did you feel the same way?
Yes, it was strange because we didn't know why they were so interested in watching us.
Nope, they had no clue. And they watched us interact from day to day, and we did all these activities, and we were in a small Sprinter van that got driven all over the countryside.
Yeah.
So we really couldn't hide. And it's interesting, over the course of those weeks, and obviously the days and hours we spent together, is there became a level of comfort with who we were. And I guess eventually they finally felt comfortable approaching us as to share what was so interesting to them about a relationship, and that I will let you share that.
Yes, that was the surprise element, I think, because we didn't hang together the whole time. We had different ceremonies and different circle groups that we were part of for those almost 2 weeks. So they got to see us individually and together interact. And I remember the one woman approaching me, and I was so surprised because she said she and her mother had such a difficult relationship. And it made her sad. And watching us interact and being around us, she felt there was something healed in her mother wound. And I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing, because that was really the first time that I had heard someone make that kind of a comment. And then at the end, when we all got together for that group photo before we left, pretty much all of them said the same thing. They were so mesmerized by how we interacted. You went your way, I went mine. We came back together again. And there was no friction between us. We were both interested in whatever we were interested in.
Yeah.
And it was a great experience. But I think it took both of us by surprise, because we had never, ever thought of us role modeling. I guess that's what it was. We can only say what we role modeled for people, what a good mother-daughter relationship should be.
Yeah, what a healthy one would be. Because I mean, over the years, we've had disagreements. I mean, we don't agree on everything. I don't mirror you because I lack self-confidence. Throughout the years of you raising me, I mean, I'm an only child, so I got all the attention. It wasn't, watered down because I had siblings. But also when something goes wrong, you get all the blame, Can't blame it on the dog. It's the dog's fault. Not that we had one, we had a cat, but through that development is you gave me a sense of self, and I had a sense of my own identity that was separate from yours. And in that though, how I will ask you this, because in through that, if someone was to say your mom gave you something, what was it? And I would say that you gave me roots and wings.
Yes.
And I have the ability to be grounded in my decision-making processes. And at the same times, I have the ability to fly with confidence. I'm not worried about, being on my own to do it. And I don't run to you with every single problem I have, looking for solutions. You gave me that sense of autonomy. It's a huge, huge word, is autonomy. I never felt I was attached to you with the apron strings that are so common. And so that I think that the roots and wings was a big thing for me. But in that, how in God's name did you get to that place of roots and wings with me? Because I am the only child. You had siblings. So was the roots and wings something that grandma instilled in you?
Two things did not come easy. Those were work on my part. And I was tied to my mother's apron strings. And I'm aghast to have to say this and admit it in a podcast, but until I was 40, I had no sense of myself whatsoever. And I'm sure that may sound strange to people, but it was the truth. And that I remember going somewhere to Kripalu. I dragged you there once. And the group that I was with, they were doing exercises for what they all wanted in the future. And we had crayons and pencils and what have you, big pieces of paper. And we were supposed to all write our affirmations and draw pictures of what we wanted. They all got started and I just sat there. I had to cheat and look at somebody else's paper to figure out what I wanted, because I had no clue. I had no clue about a life of my own that I was going to live. And I know that I knew right then and there I could never do that to you, because I was a mirror from my mother. She looked at herself and I was a reflection of her. And I was just Lil's daughter to all of her friends. I never had a name. And when I was off on my own, I was still an extension of my mother. I was never me until I was 40. And that's when it started. I had to search, it was work.
Yeah, it was work.
It was not easy. And the wings, that was a difficult thing to let you go backpacking in Europe. And it was a difficult thing to send you off to college. But those were my issues and not yours. I knew that they were mine and I needed to deal with them. And I couldn't push them on you. You weren't I didn't want you to be dependent on me. Someday when I was gone, I wanted you to be the full person that you were, not that I necessarily wanted you to be. And like I
Mhm.
said, it was just work.
It would be work.
It was work.
It would be but in essence though, it's a labor of love, and it's a
It
labor
is.
of self-love and self-care to set yourself free in order to find out who you truly are. And you're talking about wanting me to have my own sense of self. I
Yeah.
remember like you have a deadly fear of horses. I love horses. I think
Oh, God.
nothing of going horseback riding. So there are fears that you have that you I never got them. Despite the energy around them. I just didn't pick up on those, getting up on I remember you when you sailed with me one time, you sat
Oh,
there and
God.
watched me do my job. And you basically said afterwards that you sat there and thought, I know that's my child, but where in God's name did she get the courage to get up and speak on stage for a living, not just, doing speech class in the front of class, in your high school years or college years. This was actually a career choice. So it was something that you did give me. And I also wanted to note for the listeners, because with you waking up at 40, recognizing you didn't have a sense of self, and then starting to reparent yourself. And you also reparented me in that,
Yes.
because I wasn't a little kid. I was a teenager at this point.
Mhm.
So in you reparenting yourself and me watching you reparent yourself, almost through osmosis, I got the reparenting and the benefits of it as well. So I wish for anyone who's listening who has ever done any inner child work to keep doing it, and just know that the vibration of you doing that work does have the capacity to impact other people in your life and in your inner circle.
One of the biggest things that I can contribute my reparenting myself was my inner child work with John Bradshaw. He
Mhm.
wrote at Homecoming was that I think one of his first books. And I was in a store by happenstance one time, and I looked down on the shelf, on the magazine shelf, and there was a picture of him and his homecoming. They had done an interview with him. I still have the magazine, and that was probably in 1980 something. And because it just meant so much to me. And Melanie Beatty's work, Codependent No More.
Mhm.
There were lots of life lessons in there about how to reparent and take care of myself, and then same time do the same for you. You can
Mhm.
you can fix things. It's kind of like a domino effect, but it goes backwards. You reparent yourself, you reparent your child.
It's like a spool of thread, when you set that piece of thread free and you begin to unwind it and get back to the source. And so often you begin to recognize that in your patterns that you have and in your patterning, that they really aren't your patterns. It's just a result of the patterns that you picked up by observing the people who were raising you. And you begin to emulate those because that's what makes you part of the tribe of your family. And I find it's interesting is that sometimes the more you try and fit in with your tribe, the harder it gets, because your subconscious mind has you completely at odds and you don't understand why. So you had those books to help guide you through the reparenting process of the self, but you also went to a therapist as well. Was that when
Yeah,
you were 40, or
I
was that later in
know.
time?
I spent a year in therapy, and my therapist laughed at me. I still remember. I used to go in with a list of things I wanted to discuss in therapy. I mean, I figured I was paying a lot of money for that, so I wanted to get the most out of it. And I would say, I read this book, and this is what I want to talk about, or I have this thing I want to discuss. So yes, and she was a wonderful, wonderful therapist. I kind of think from talking to other people about their therapist, she was a bit unusual.
Mhm.
And I remember the last time that I talked to her, you were 22.
Mm.
So I had not spoken to her for a good couple of years, and I called her up and I said, "Can I come in and see you?" And she said, "Well, what do you want?" She was very specific about why I was coming to see her. And I told her, I said, "I have a 22-year-old daughter who, this was back in your days when you wanted to stay in Greece, and we were
Mhm,
having, you did come home, we were having those kinks that we needed to work out. And
mhm.
I did not know how to deal with that because all of my friends had kids that were young, not in their 20s. So I told her what I wanted. She had a daughter who was about your age.
Mhm.
So she said, "Okay, come on in." And I went to talk to her, and she said at 22, I guess girls, because that's what we're talking about, have one foot in the nest and one foot out of the nest.
Mhm.
And they're conflicted between, I want to go, I don't want to go, I want to be independent, I want to be autonomous. Yes. So we had that so that was the last time I saw her, was for that reason. And she gave
Well,
me advice. Not most therapists don't, but at that point I think we were more like friends after all. She knew my whole life.
yeah.
Yep, she did.
Well, I think it's admirable that that she asked you, why do you want to come in? Because that just shows you that she wasn't in it for the money.
No.
Sometimes I believe that there are therapists who just seem to milk the system, and no offense to the therapists who are out there who are doing good work, but I do believe that there are therapists and even coaches who are they're in it for the money, so they string their clients along, keeping them hobbled like you would a horse so it can't leave the nest. So I'm very pleased that you had a very proactive and healthy therapist who wasn't working through her stuff through you.
When I hear people who have been in therapy for 5 years, that's what I think.
Hmm.
And at the outset, she asked me for goals, what I wanted to achieve in my therapy. And
Hmm.
it was funny because I remember the first thing that I said to her, and that was, God, Yvette, how many years ago?
Yeah.
I'm 76, so that was 36 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, I said, I have I used to have a good relationship with my mother, and I don't anymore. And
Hmm.
I want it to go back to the way that it was. And that's where we started. I
That's a
still
really but well, did she point out, or did you come to realize that to go back to where you were in that relationship in order to return to that same synchronicity that you had with grandma would have been a compromise in your sense of self? Did she point that out, or did you work that out yourself?
I worked it out. She
Yeah.
knew right then and there that I couldn't, that it could never be what it was. But she got me to the point where it was as close to ever as it was ever going to get. I mean, it never did
Okay.
heal itself completely, even towards the end. But
Hmm.
she was smart enough to know, and she was even smart enough to know, she knew I had an abandonment issue,
Mm.
which I did not have a clue about. And that wasn't something I had read about or
Hmm.
understood. And so when it came to the end, she said, Linda, we've achieved everything that you came in here for. And so now we have to bring this to an end. And I'm going to let you write your own prescription. You can come in here every week like you have been. You can come in every 2 weeks, or you can come in every month. She was giving me all these options that I could choose from because she knew that's what I needed. And
Hmm.
so that was how I ended it. I did like every 2 weeks for a while, but I did not know that. The abandonment issue wasn't something we had talked about, but she was
Hmm.
smarter than me, so she knew.
Well, and I wouldn't say she was smarter than you. She was just educated on a subject that you were not at that point. And I think because I was there to observe a lot of this, and in your journey, I was there to observe a lot of your journey with grandma,
Yeah.
and who was a very interesting individual. I
A
mean,
character. She was a
she was a
character.
character. She had so much personality. And, for our listeners who are joining us, you'll hear stories about grandma throughout the ensuing, podcasts that you bring up. 'Cause you'll hear stories about grandma that are, I think, hilarious, that I still laugh about today, from my childhood even. But being part of that journey and being a witness to it, and I say witness because it's just observing without an emotional attachment to it, not whether it's going to be successful or it's not. It had no emotional, um, I had no emotional tie to it. Obviously I don't want to see people I love suffer, obviously, but I didn't feel I had to step in and try and fix it. I didn't feel that responsibility. But I think the greatest lesson that came, was acceptance. I think, and I really feel that you came to accept grandma for who she was, whether she was in her good space or her not so good space at times. And you accepted it no matter what, because you realized that in essence, it really wasn't about you. It was just, what we all do, we project. So, and I'm sure in some ways she felt abandoned by you because, you went off to see a therapist and you became a different person. You were still the same person on the outside. Like you didn't go and become radically different and dye your hair purple and start wearing, weird stuff. But at the same time, I'm sure at some way a level of insecurity must have surfaced for her because you were no longer the mini me of her.
And I was the oldest of
Ah,
four.
there you
So
go.
that, and it was 4 years until my oldest brother was born. So
Mhm.
I was the apple of her eye, and that's how, we came to that. And it was as like I said, the relationship never totally got repaired. But as you said, I just came to accept that mom was mom, and there
Mhm.
was never going to be any different. But I think the first assault on that relationship was when we moved to Western Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yep.
left her because I remember being so excited about I got promoted. I got promoted. And but I'm moving. I got promoted, but I'm moving. I have to move. And the first thing she said to me, well, not congratulations. I'm really happy and excited for you. It was, well, what are you going to do if it doesn't work out?
Oh, that's a big question. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that was
also like a needle in your balloon.
somebody rained on my parade,
Somebody did.
which she had a way of doing.
It was like the last
Yeah.
breath of air out of a balloon. Oh yeah. And there you go. But you
And then
know what? You still followed your
I
your
did.
path
And
in that. Well, good. So that gives us, kind of an opportunity to get some insight into who you are and who I am a little bit, into giving our listeners some opportunities to get to know us. And let's just take a moment to talk about the title of our podcast, because I think it's in looking at different names of podcasts out of there, out of whether it's Shopify, Spotify, or Apple and their iTunes, is trying to find a name, because this is something that held us up, and we found a way of, we finally just worked around it to put together a list of subjects and also guests who we're going to invite on.
yes,
um the title, Spacebar, mindful pauses for conscious conversation. And I know the conscious conversation was really important to both of us, because it's something that we've had on my whole life. I can't imagine not having good, juicy conversation.
we've all had those.
Yeah, yeah, amongst the whole family, not just between you and
Yeah.
me. So that was important. And then the mindful pauses are almost as if you are just hitting the pause button on life, so that the busyness of life, you just step out of that, the flow of rushing water, where you're being taken like a little boat on on a river without a rudder, but giving yourself the opportunity to pause and take in someone else's perspective, and to open your eyes to other opportunities to learn more about things in life. Yep.
I would agree. And I also think that if you're pausing for reflection, I mean, that's an important part. I mean, after all, we were 40 years into it, or however old we were when we took that Sacred Journeys for Women. And we'd never paused to reflect on how wonder and how did this happen? We didn't know
Mm-hmm. Mm-mm.
until we paused to reflect on our lives. We just didn't.
Yeah.
We just kept living them, whatever was in front of us. So this pause gives us opportunity for that. It actually is great because it makes me remember things that I'd totally forgotten.
That, in the pausing as well. And also with, I guess for me, I always assumed that everybody had the same relationship with their mother, but as I got to meet my friends' mothers, and as my friends got to meet you, they recognized that what I had to share wasn't just a made up fantasy. It wasn't an illusion about my mom that was just made up. So there are lots of my friends who have met you over the years now understand that it's true. This is definitely a real thing. It's not an illusion. It's not a fairy tale. It is the real deal. But I just assumed it's just the way things were in everybody's house. And I never even considered until that Sacred Journeys trip that we were doing something that was different and unique. And then we've just been lives, you've been having your experience in life. I've been having my experience in life. And, we've talked about this, and we talked about putting together mother and daughter workshops, and we had done some research on that. But I think the pandemic and, being able to do things more online has really opened up a new door for us to explore this, whether we help women with their children, women with their mothers, men who want to tune in, who want to, improve their relationships with their mothers or their sisters or even their wives, can possibly evolve from this too.
Just think, for some reason, when I've listened to so many stories over the years, I'm a writer, and we didn't say what we did, I don't
No, not
think.
yet. No, we
No.
haven't covered that yet.
So as a writer and an editor, I've listened to thousands of people's stories, and they get intimate. They're not just about the subject that we're talking about. They kind of drift off into something, and into something more detailed about our lives. And they've been, actually, when I listen to people, there are more people who have that difficulty with their mothers, and
Mhm.
it starts, that's where the rest of their life kind of goes. I won't say it goes down the tube, but when they're spending so much of their life resisting, they're not living their lives. They're just,
Mhm.
that's what occupies space in their heads.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and that's just not right. You should be free. I know, because it occupied mine. I wasn't free.
You set yourself free. How's that?
I set myself free. Yeah.
And the title of a space bar came, I was in meditation one day, and that's where, because you hit the space bar. If you're watching a movie on your computer, you hit the space bar to pause the movie. You hit the space bar to pause the music, whether you're watching YouTube, whether you're watching a movie on Apple, whatever the case is, it's something that's pre-recorded, you hit the space bar. So that was where that came from initially, but it also reminded me of the many times when you would sit in and work, and I would hear your thumbs just whack that space bar, every single time you had to put a space between words. And the space in between words is such an impact with us, because it's those mindful pauses in between thoughts where something else has an opportunity to drop in. It's those mindful pauses that we get onto this hamster wheel of trying to problem solve and project in the future or ruminate about the past, and we're not fully present. We're not, we're either living in the future, or we're still stuck in the past. And finding space in between thoughts, or space in between emotions, is where we process. It's where we allow our subconscious mind to process whatever is going on, whether it's going to, stick the emotion in the body somewhere, or if it's going to just, pass through, like watching clouds to the sky. So I like the combination of the space for, mindful pauses for conscious conversations, because it really is about us creating space and to share our thoughts, our feelings, our philosophies, and just hope that, it impacts others in the way it has impacted us, in positive ways.
Oftentimes those spaces is where those aha moments come from. That realization of something, geez, I never thought of that. It's a fresh thought. It just kind of pops up from the subconscious mind. So I think they're really, really important. I know when I do the interviews, I can't speak while the other person is speaking, but I often have those moments of, oh my God, my life is like theirs, or my experience, or I have something new and fresh that I walk away from with that. Wonderful.
So at this point, we've talked about, why we're here for this podcast and what we want to share through the series of episodes we're going to be building. And as you mentioned, you're a writer. Do you want to share with the audience what you write and what you, just what you write and who you write for?
I write for a healthy lifestyle magazine, and have for 20 years, going on 21. It's called Natural Awakenings. It's not published everywhere. It's probably about 40 different or 45 different cities in the United States. And it is all about healthy lifestyles. And I've also been published in 3 other books that are, what do you call them? Like, not composites, but they're different authors who have contributed to, and I've done 3 of those. And I'm also the president of the Southwest Florida Reset Center, which is an environmental organization, and we educate people on climate change solutions. Amongst other things, we have a regular reset conversation once a month on Zoom that people can tune into. So I'm about the environment and healthy lifestyles. That's what's occupied my time for 20 years. And how about you? Tell them what you do.
Well, what I do really isn't something that I think brings a why, to the podcast, only because as I'm a head of operations for an international company that's based out of Miami. So it's what I do. However, what got me here was the 15 plus years I worked on board cruise ships. That was an opportunity to live my dream, something I had dreamed I wanted to do since I was a little girl. So I manifested that and was the Julie McCoy of a cruise ship. And I got to live in the best moments of people's lives. And in some cases, also some of the worst moments of people's lives. And I think over the years of being immersed in humanity, it really gave me a perspective of people, of human beings, and their reactive patterns, responsive patterns. It gave me from joy to grief to frustration, every single emotion that's probably out there. I've seen it firsthand, witnessed it. So I believe that who I became as a person was really developed through that work that I did. I remember when you sailed with me, it was something that you said, it was a mantle. I wore it. It wasn't a job that I did. It was who I was. Yes. And I don't think that has changed much over the years since I left sailing on board ships. I've stayed in the cruise industry now from a shore side of it, and working with human development of our team. I get involved with that quite a bit. But for the most part, what I do now is operational. However, I feed my soul through teaching. I teach yoga nidra meditation. I teach yoga therapy. I teach yoga now and then, but really as tools to help with human development and for helping people get out of their own ways. And I take on private clients who want to do more intensive work. So I've done that over the years as well. The one-on-ones are really a great opportunity for people to really do a deep dive without having to worry about, oh, is the person next to me going to judge me for my feedback or my opinion or my thoughts or my vulnerability? So working with people on one-on-one to help them heal through trauma has been something that has been a tremendous gift that I have been able to help people with, through from anxiety to, this why bother attitude to breath work. I mean, it's just been a facilitation of helping people break out of their self-prescribed limitations.
Would you like to tell people just how many people you have encountered in your career, which I think is phenomenal? So let them know. In your cruise days.
In my cruise days, just calculating, when I was either a social hostess or a cruise director, I figured that over those years, probably 1.5 million people had come and gone from my gangways. And then since I have come shoreside, it's not as many, but I still interact with people. And funny enough, I got a text message, or it was an email from somebody. Somebody was sailing on a Norwegian cruise line ship about a year ago. And they said, "You're on TV." So when I was working shoreside for another company, I had done a lot of video work for our in stateroom TV channels.
Oh,
Whether
okay.
whether it was port specific or brand specific, I did pre-recorded talks. And they were in their stateroom and they were watching their TV channel, and something that I had recorded showed up. And his wife said, "Oh my God, that's Yvette." So he took a picture of it just to prove that he saw me. And then he sent me the picture and said, "This is you, right?" And I said, "Yeah, that's me." So my stuff stayed on TV with Disney and with Norwegian for quite a while. Even with Restart after the pandemic, because of contractual obligations. That was pretty cool.
So you're still sailing.
I'm still sailing, just not the same capacity, but it's not unusual to cross paths. I'll be somewhere and people will say, "You look really familiar." And then we begin to put, two and two together, and they go, "Oh my gosh, well, I cruise with you." And so I get reminded of what a small world that we live in.
I wanted to, while I'm saying that you're still sailing, it reminded me of, I went on a cruise with Sandy Henson,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of my BFFs. And you knew the cruise director, I think it was, on that ship.
No, the shopping guide.
The
The
shopping guide on that ship. And out of all there were like 4,000 people on that ship. One night, he comes up to me and says, "You're Yvette's mother." I was so flabbergasted that somebody could pick me out of 4,000 people. He found me. So
Yep.
we've always, wherever we go, we've kind of had that thing where people recognize one or the other, because we look so much alike. We used to look more alike, but as I've aged, we have the differences now that people,
Yeah.
but the face is still there.
The face is still there. And, small world. And I know we were talking about grandma earlier, but I'll just close this episode with something about grandma and the small world that we live in. It was my first year on ships, and I was going to be away for Christmas. And it was something that I didn't typically miss. I mean, I couldn't remember. I think it was probably my first Christmas that was going to be away from home. And grandma had baked me cookies, and she wanted to send them to the ship for me. So I had, her Christmas cookies. So she baked her cookies. And then at that time, she was living in York, Pennsylvania. And she was going over to the VA hospital to go see Woody. And she thought, well, I'll mail the package from Gettysburg, and then it will, Gettysburg to Miami. It'll get to Yvette in time. So she walks into the post office and she puts the box up on the counter. And the man turns the box around to look at the postal code so he can calculate how much the postage was going to be. And he just got stuck. And he said to her, "This is for Yvette." And she said, "Yes, it says Yvette on the address." And he said, "I know, but this is for Yvette." And she said, "Yes, she's my granddaughter. These are cookies, blah, blah, blah." She tells the whole story. And he just kind of shakes his head and he said, "But this is for Yvette." And she said, "Can you just basically run the postage? I need to go." She couldn't figure out why he was so flabbergasted. Well, she finally said to him, like, "Really, what's the big deal? She's my granddaughter. It's cookies. Can you at least process so I can leave?" And here he and his wife had just sailed with me on the ship, had met me in my role of a social hostess back then. So I got to meet all the passengers on the ship because the captain's cocktail parties and the captain's events, as well as my own events. So here he had just met me, and here she was in Gettysburg mailing me a package. And I mean, he was so flabbergasted by the fact that he had just been on a ship with me. And what are the chances that someone's grandmother walks into a post office? It sounds like there was this one time in band camp. What are the odds of that happening? And it sounds too good to be true, but it is. It's the truth, and it just shows you the power that you have to impact people's lives in sometimes the smallest ways. Someone crosses paths with you, and you never see them again, but something that you did for them just anchored a memory in them, and it changes their life. And it was a huge blessing. But that was I remember. And by the way, by the time the cookies got to me, I could have just opened up the tin. They were crumbs, and I could just have poured the milk in and had cookie dough cereal, because there was nothing left of the cookie. I had chocolate chips and crumbles.
That's kind of what we're hoping for, is that we leave people with memorable stories that anchor and stick with them.
Yep, absolutely. And before we wrap up, do you want to mention the books that you have co-authored with?
Actually, I'd have to go looking for them because, unlike you, who have Chicken Soup for the Soul, I don't off the top of my head. And this is what I'm going to tell people. I do not remember what I write. I have to actually go back and look. When I write something, it's gone from my mind and I'm on to the next thing. It's been that way for 20 years and 244 issues of the magazine. So next time I will tell them the name of the book.
There you go. Well, I do know the title of one of them, which is Enough, with Laurie McKinnon. She was the author and publisher of that. So she was the driving force. And I'll put that name and then a link to Amazon in the bottom, down below our podcast, so people can see how they can get a hold of the book. And yes, I did contribute to Chicken Soup for the Soul, Be You. And it was 101 stories for affirmations for women. So that's my one publication so far in my life.
And I'd like to add, we'll have Laurie on as a guest on one of our shows.
Awesome. That'd be awesome. Yep.
Okay.
Now we have reason to. So in future episodes, you can come back and share the titles of your other books, and I will share links in the bottom. But are there any parting thoughts or any parting words for our listeners?
Just to have a great day and a great life.
All right. Well, that's good. That's good words of wisdom. My name is Yvette. I'm the daughter.
My name is Linda, and I'm the mother.
And together we are Spacebar, mindful pauses for conscious conversations.
Yes. See you next time.
Bye for now.